11 o'clock in the middle of July. You didn't need a weather forecast to know the afternoon was gonna be a killer. I loosened my tie and looked up at the white-hot sky. Whatever brought me here had better be worth the sweat. Only mad dogs and Englishmen went walking under a sun like this, and I'm not barking. The house sat across the road from a church. The heat had spent the morning trying to convince me I was in Southern California, but the illusion stopped there. No white stucco, no palms, no movie stars behind tinted glass, just red brick and clipped hedges. This was Croydon, London, on the hottest day of the year. Yes, here I am in Croydon, where one of the most influential writers of the 20th century, Raymond Chandler, spent much of his youth. Through his writing, and the protagonist of his books, the hard-boiled, cynical private detective Philip Marlowe, he helped forge the tone of the film noir, and even wrote a few of the very quintessential big-screen noirs himself. In this video, I'm going to talk about the author and his relationship with cinema and the impact he had on the form. And tell me your favourite Chandler books, screenplays, or adaptations down in the comments below. And try and write like the man himself, hard-boiled, sharp-eyed, and wise to the racket. And if this little picture suited you, leave your mark, sign on for more, and stay close to the bell so you know when another case hits your desk. Cheers. Chandler was born in Chicago in 1888. His Irish mother took him to the UK at the turn of the 20th century to have his education here, moving into this house in Croydon. When he was 24, he moved back to the States, and in 1913 settled in Los Angeles, the city he is most associated with. But when the world was at war, Chandler found himself back in Europe, this time in the trenches of World War I. In these battlefields, he came face to face with death, and in his description of dead bodies in his novels, you know these images never left him. One of his mates during that time was Gordon Pascal, and at the end of the war, Chandler had an affair with Gordon's stepmother, Pearl, a woman 18 years his senior. She divorced her husband, but couldn't marry Raymond as his mother disapproved. But when his mother died in 1923, he went ahead and married Pearl. He worked odd jobs in Los Angeles, finally becoming a vice president of an oil syndicate. But he did have a lot of similar vices to his future character, Marlowe. But unlike Marlowe, his alcoholism and womanizing only led to disaster, and he was fired. During the Depression, he turned to writing and got published in Black Mask magazine. And it would be in these magazines that Chandler, alongside other writers like Dashiell Hammett, helped create the hard-boiled genre. But for Chandler, it would be his first novel that would change his life. The 1939 classic, The Big Sleep. And what a hell of a debut book. And there are two standout aspects to it. The first is the setting, Los Angeles. Almost all of his books are set here, and he helped create this mythic LA that is now an aspect of the city seen in so many other fictional depictions. A city of femme fatales, morally ambiguous men, the rich, the tough, and the desperate. Smoky bars and blinding sunshine, where you either live in a luxury mansion or a cheap bug-infested apartment. This noir vision of LA is one the city has never fully been able to shake off, especially when depicted in film. Before Chandler, it was a city that was really just used as a set, but wasn't really chronicled as a town itself. It didn't have a fictional identity, such as many other cities on Earth, and eventually he helped create that identity. That can be seen in many other films. From the 30s set Chinatown, to the 50s set LA Confidential, and even off to the far-off future of 7 years ago in Blade Runner. And maybe the longest enduring aspect is the voice of the book, all narrated by one of the great literary characters, Philip Marlowe, a self-deprecating, stubborn, world-weary private eye. The story is notoriously hard to follow, with even Chandler forgetting who committed one of the murders. But what really matters here is the tone and the feeling. and those would filter straight into the American noir films of the next decade. For my money, the second Marlowe novel is even better. Farewell, My Lovely. I think this is the one where his vision of LA was really cemented, with shady nightclubs, gambling dens, corrupt cops. Also the first one where Marlowe is put through the ringer. He's beaten and drugged, but keeps getting up, and never stops being witty and difficult. And again, this type of protagonist would become more and more familiar. The why won't you stay down hero, who annoys the villains even more by not shutting up, with the jokes seem more piercing than the bullets. He is also, I feel, an early example of the loner hero. He could have any woman he wants, but moves through the world alone. The third book, The High Window, which I've lost, is also very good, but maybe the first one that feels a bit more formulaic. Turn up, take a case, it's not what it seems, go through shit, solve the case, but nothing is really resolved. And in the same year, the first feature film adaptation of one of his novels was released. Yes, RKO took Farewell, My Lovely and made the plot the basis for the third Falcon movie. And the Falcon was quite far away from Marlowe. He's a gentleman detective played by George Sanders. And here the action takes place in New York, and it certainly lacks any of the Chandler atmosphere. And that same year, the third book, The High Window, was made by 20th Century Fox. But they also didn't really do Chandler, giving the plot over to the B-movie franchise about the detective Michael Shayne. Chandler continued to release the distinctive Marlowe books, and in 1943 released The Lady in the Lake. This is my personal favourite standard Marlowe mystery. It's a little easier to follow and has a brilliant twist. But it would be the next year, 1944, that cinema got a heavy dose of Chandler. One of the other creators of the hard-boiled crime novel, James M. Cain, had released Double Indemnity, and soon Paramount had bought the rights, and the great Billy Wilder was brought on to direct. And after reading and loving The Big Sleep, the producer recommended that Chandler come on to adapt it. It was commonplace for studios to bring in respected authors to Hollywood to help write screenplays. These authors inevitably had a bad time and drank too much. F. Scott Fitzgerald famously struggled out there while working for MGM, where my grandfather, John Davenport, a critic from London, worked alongside him writing scripts. While out there, my grandfather had been given a tip by novelist William Faulkner, who had done a lot of script doctoring for studios. He said he should write 5 pages a day and never any more. Then they'll believe you're working. Well, Chandler, being new to the industry, didn't know the rules and asked for only $1,000, telling them he'd be done in a week. Well, lucky for him, they didn't take him up on that offer and instead paid him $740 a week, and the writing process lasted for 4 months. But it wasn't an easy one. He and Wilder clashed heavily, and Wilder even joked that it drove Chandler back to the drink, who was in AA at the start of writing. Wilder's experience working with Raymond led him to write and direct The Lost Weekend, about a man struggling with alcohol. But the script and the film was a triumph and became one of the seminal examples of the film noir. Chandler's voiceover narration became a staple of the genre, and in it our lead is confessing to his crimes. And the film is filled with outstanding Chandler dialogue.
Will you be here too?
I guess so, I usually am.
Same chair, same perfume, same anklet?
I wonder if I know what you mean.
I wonder if you wonder.
And even though Wilder hated working with him, he did say the dialogue was Chandler's work, and the film would go on to be nominated for Best Screenplay. It tells the story of an insurance salesman who is convinced by a femme fatale to kill her husband to claim on his life insurance. In Fred MacMurray's lead, we have a weak character led by his desires and not his brain. This wasn't your usual Hollywood righteous hero. This was a doomed man. And in Barbara Stanwyck, we get maybe the greatest femme fatale in film history, a woman as dishonest as she is beautiful. And of course the whole thing takes place in Los Angeles. and I visited the house from the film for my video on Los Angeles and cinema, which can be found above and down below.
It was one of those California Spanish houses everyone was nuts about 10 or 15 years ago. This one must have cost somebody about 30,000 bucks. That is, if he ever finished paying for it.
Chandler would go on to write for Hollywood, working on screenplays, including the romantic And Now Tomorrow, the horror The Unseen, and even Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train, although his script was not used. But back in 1944, Philip Marlowe finally reached the big screen. RKO, who had bought the rights and adapted Farewell My Lovely into a Falcon movie, finally saw that it was Chandler's style and the character of Marlowe that were the money makers. The RKO boss thought, we already own the rights, why don't we just make it again? But this time, B-picture players were told to up their game. So what hard man, tough-looking, no-nonsense actor was going to play Marlowe for the first time on the big screen? The crooner Dick Powell.
'Cause I only have eyes for you, dear.
Powell was getting older, so he wanted to move into hard man roles. And Chandler loved Powell's depiction of Marlowe. But Mike Mazurki nearly steals the show as one of Chandler's greatest side characters, the slow-thinking, hulking thug Moose. And I think this is a really fun adaptation of the book, with Powell being flippant and funny. And it also helps this is one of the books where Marlowe feels like he's in real danger, with a great section where he's kidnapped and drugged up on heroin. They can't say heroin here, but we get the point. And when he finally escapes, all he needs is...
black coffee, eggs, and a scotch and soda.
Go away.
Excuse me.
Powell was the first big screen Marlowe, but he was soon to be out-Marlowed in the next big screen adaptation of a Chandler book. Yes, in 1946, Howard Hawks made what many still see as the quintessential Marlowe film, The Big Sleep, and in it he found the perfect star to play the world-weary private eye, an actor who specialised in playing men who'd seen it all, bought the t-shirt, lost it, and drank hourly thinking about it, the remarkable Humphrey Bogart. He's a perfect Marlowe, but maybe a little short, which keeps being brought up.
You're not very tall, are you? Oh, you're a mess, aren't you?
I'm not very tall either.
The highlight of this film is the chemistry between him and Lauren Bacall, recapturing the magic they had on To Have and Have Not, and presumably on their wedding night before making this film. Hawks brilliantly captures the two sisters in this mystery. And there is one other scene which is really rather steamy, where Marlowe hides from a storm in a bookshop, flirts and drinks with the bookseller, and it's heavily implied they do more than that.
Little things like that make enough. Hello.
Hello.
Much like Murder My Sweet, with the heroine, this had to censor itself a little, where instead of a man photographing nude photos, he's taking pictures of women in Chinese clothes. Ooh la la. And in the same year, there came the only original Chandler screenplay that was produced, 1946's The Blue Dahlia. Alan Ladd was hired as the lead before the script had been written, but as Ladd could have been called to go back and fight in World War II at any moment, the producers asked Chandler to produce a script in record time. Under the stress, Chandler stated that he could only write when drunk. Producer John Houseman said this was fine, and to make sure Raymond stayed pissed, he had a driver, a nurse, and secretaries around the clock to take notes when Chandler rambled in delirious sleep. Many see this as an escalation of his drinking and the beginning of the end. The story follows a soldier who returns from war to find that his wife has been an unfaithful drunk. Then she is murdered, and there are a few suspects: her husband, her lover, and one of her husband's mates from the Navy who had suffered a brain injury. Originally it was this character who Chandler had as the murderer, but the Navy would not allow it. And so he rushed to create a new, rather lame ending to this whodunit. In the end, he was not happy with the script. He also hated Veronica Lake's performance in it, referring to her as Moronica Lake. He did end up getting his second Oscar nomination, but this is far from his best work. But the film did have a legacy of sorts, a particularly dark one. The following year, an unsolved brutal murder made front-page news. The mutilated body of Elizabeth Short was found on a vacant lot in Los Angeles. One of the places she was supposedly spotted the night before was the Hollywood dive bar, the Frolic Room. She was wearing a black dress the night she vanished, and the media had a field day, saying she was a woman who prowled Hollywood Boulevard at night, and they gave her a nickname, the Black Dahlia. As the film The Blue Dahlia was recently a big hit, it is generally believed to be the inspiration. This unsolved murder is now part of LA lore, and was one of the big inspirations for one of the other major LA writers, James Ellroy. His own mother was murdered in the 1950s when he was growing up as a child, and like Short, her murderer was never discovered. When learning of the Black Dahlia, he became obsessed with that crime, and his first great success came in the 1987 novel The Black Dahlia, a book merging fact and fiction. It was adapted into a film by Brian De Palma. It's not very good, and Ellroy has nothing good to say about it either.
The stupid and good-looking Josh Hartnett and Scarlett Johansson are the lead actors, and I'm not holding my breath.
Ellroy's early work was definitely influenced by Chandler, but he's since said Chandler's full of crap. But if there's one thing Ellroy likes to do, is to troll. I love James Ellroy, and he may be a subject of a future video.
If the Kennedys went after litigiously everyone who wrote bad things about them, they'd be in court all day, every day, and they wouldn't have any time to get drunk and rape women.
The same year as that horrific murder, there were 2 more adaptations of Chandler's books, but they were far from the best. The first was the only adaptation of Lady in the Lake, and the man behind the camera, in more ways than one, was MGM star Robert Montgomery. He convinced MGM to buy the rights to the book and let him direct and star in it. They paid Chandler $35,000 for the rights, and then paid him more to write the screenplay. Apparently what he turned in was a mess, so they got someone else to write it. And for sure, the script doesn't have that Chandler zing. But the script was not the main issue. The big problem was that Montgomery decided that it would be the first ever film where the camera was the point of view of the protagonist. It's quite a cool idea. You get to be Philip Marlowe, which even the poster exclaimed. But boy oh boy, does it not work. It's stagey, awkward, slow, odd and boring. And it also doesn't help that Montgomery's voice and occasional reflection make up one lousy Marlowe. Some of the scenes with the eerie vocal choir that make up the music are quite creepy and strange, but the whole thing is a dud. Despite them not using his script, Chandler had insisted on being credited as a writer, but after seeing the final product, he asked for his name to be removed, and the film would mark the end of Montgomery's 18 years at MGM. And later, in 1947, another Montgomery would take a swing at playing Marlowe, George Montgomery, in 20th Century Fox's adaptation of The High Window, The Brasher Doubloon. This is a very middling film. It could have easily been called The Middle or even Ground Floor Window. Nothing really stands out. It's not particularly stylish, and there's not really a performance that's anything better than average. There isn't a lot to say about it. It may be a better film than the first-person Lady in the Lake, but at least that's memorable for at least trying something different. In 1949, the 40s were coming to an end, and it had been 10 years since the release of the first Marlowe novel. And in that time, there had been 3 more novels, and Chandler had been having a terrible time writing for Hollywood. And his experiences in Tinseltown definitely affected his next Marlowe mystery, the 5th book in the series, The Little Sister. Chandler's writing had affected Hollywood, but now Hollywood had affected his writing. The book itself isn't one of his best, but it is fascinating to hear Chandler's take on the Hollywood machine. Wonderful what Hollywood will do to a nobody. It'll make a radiant glamour queen out of a drab little wench who ought to be ironing a truck driver's shirts. A He-Man hero with shining eyes and brilliant smile reeking of sexual charm out of some overgrown kid who was meant to go to work with a lunchbox. And here's a last one. Real cities have something else, some individual bony structure under the muck. Los Angeles is Hollywood, and hates it. It ought to consider itself damn lucky. Without Hollywood, it would be a mail-order city. Everything in the catalog, you could get better somewhere else. In this book, he even has a character that walks around the room in the manner that Billy Wilder did when they worked together. And at one point, Marlowe even catches himself slagging off the city and its inhabitants, and it feels like Chandler is telling himself to go easier. Behind Encino, an occasional light winked from the hills through thick trees, the home of screen stars. Phooey, the veterans of 1,000 beds. Hold it, Marlowe. You're not human tonight. Chandler was done with the city, and with his much older wife getting increasingly ill and booze having a full grip on him, they decided to leave the City of Angels. They moved to a wealthy coastal neighborhood of San Diego, La Jolla. He wrote his next book there, and for my money, it's his greatest novel, and one of my favorite books of all time, 1953's The Long Goodbye. With his wife dying and him drinking himself to death, he wrote a very self-reflective book. Less about mood and mystery, and more about characters, their relationships, and their flaws. It literally has a character that is a writer who wrote successful books, but ones he doesn't consider to be high literature. And while he struggles to write, he is also being destroyed by his alcoholism. This is also a book about friendship, and has a stronger romantic element than his other books. The beginning of the book is just his bonding and friendship with a drunk war veteran. They hang out in bars drinking gimlets, with Marlowe insisting that a true gimlet is equal measurements gin and Rose's lime cordial. The mystery then starts when his new friend's wealthy wife ends up dead. He helps the guy flee and is soon put on another case, with connections to the murdered woman. It's a great book, definitely more than just a mystery. It's a wonderful character study, and Chandler considered this to be his best work. The very next year, his wife Sissy died, and his drinking increased yet again. He even attempted suicide. He entered his bath and shot his handgun, but aimed it at the ceiling before weeping uncontrollably. His royalties meant he still had plenty of cash, and he spent the next 5 years traveling the world. These trips were full of boozing, proposing to women, and failed suicide attempts. He finished one more book, which he adapted from an unproduced script he wrote for Universal in the 40s. He put Marlowe in the place of the original character and moved it from Canada to a town clearly inspired by La Jolla. 1958's Playback. It's quite a simple, small story, which ends a bit abruptly, and is widely considered his weakest novel. I still enjoy some elements though, especially the return of a love interest from the previous book. His having a regular romantic partner, I think, is quite moving considering the loss of the writer's wife. Chandler started writing an 8th Marlowe novel, where Marlowe was now married to that love interest. But Raymond never finished it. In 1959, after a night of drink, he contracted pneumonia and died at the age of 71. He wanted to be cremated and have his ashes put alongside Sissy's, but he never left any instructions in his will, so he ended up being buried in another city to take that big sleep alone. By the next decade, Hollywood felt like a very different place indeed. People took off their hats, and the hippies had moved in. And 10 years after his death, his take on Hollywood, The Little Sister, was adapted into a major motion picture, simply titled Marlowe. but this is a very, very 60s take on the character. It's wry, light, and easygoing, but lacks the punch and nastiness of the books. This is hardly hard-boiled, more soft-boiled detective fiction. James Garner plays the role so relaxed that he mostly seems disinterested, and it doesn't have the interesting take on Hollywood the book had. It's also missing something else, the biting wit of Chandler. The screenwriter felt Raymond's dialogue hadn't aged well, and so rewrote 90% of the conversations, and it does the film no favours. Two noticeable things about this film. It features the often used Bradbury building for Marlowe's office. This location would be most noticeably used in the very Chandler-esque Blade Runner. But it also has an appearance from Bruce Lee. But this film failed to bring Marlowe into the modern world. But the next film brought him up to date magnificently. 1973's The Long Goodbye. Amazingly, the screenwriter from 1946's The Big Sleep, Lee Brackett, was brought on to write the screenplay. And fantastically, she knew the Marlowe of the 40s would not fit the 70s. Lots of changes are made to the novel, but the tone and focus on character are all still there. Howard Hawks was offered to return to direct, but declined. Peter Bogdanovich was next up and also said no, but did recommend someone. One of the greatest directors of all time, Robert Altman. And boy oh boy did he bring his own unique touch and style, with Altman calling it a satire and melancholy. In regular Altman fashion, he got together a hell of a cast, including Elliot Gould as Marlowe, Sterling Hayden, Henry Gibson, and while the previous adaptation boasted Bruce Lee, here we got an uncredited cameo from Arnold Schwarzenegger in his underwear. But let's talk about Gould's Marlowe. This isn't as close as Dick Powell's or Bogart's performances, but this is how Marlowe would have behaved totally in 70s Hollywood. This was a new generation, a new city, and so a new Private Dick was needed. But he still has that world weariness, the stubbornness, and the wry humour.
Listen, Harry, in case you lose me in traffic, this is the address where I'm going. You
Thank
look
you.
great. Harry, I would straighten your tires a bit.
Yeah.
Harry, I'm proud to have you following.
This is a knockout Marlowe. The film also has a superb score, courtesy of John Williams, with the main theme appearing in all shapes and forms, in supermarket jingles, and even doorbells. The ending is bleak and dark, but in many ways I believe it suits the story even better. Sorry, Chandler.
You'll never learn. You're a born loser.
Yeah, I even lost my cat.
And the very next year, Chandler felt very present in Roman Polanski's masterpiece, Chinatown. The screenwriter, Robert Towne, was partially inspired to write it by a magazine article called Raymond Chandler's L.A. And in directing the film, Polanski says he took the technique of only seeing the story through the lead character's POV straight from Chandler. And the very next year, 1975, we got another big screen Marlowe in another adaptation of Farewell My Lovely. Rather than updating it, we're back to 1940s Los Angeles, this time with an aging Marlowe played by Robert Mitchum. He would have been fantastic back in the 40s, but after The Long Goodbye, this does feel a little regressive, especially as we've already had a really good adaptation of Farewell My Lovely. It's not as good as Murder My Sweet and doesn't really add much, and the narration would be easily mocked in films such as The Naked Gun.
She had a full set of curves which nobody had been able to improve on. She was giving me the kind of look I could feel in my hip pocket.
She had a full set of curves, and the kind of legs you'd like to suck on for a day. She was giving me a look I could feel in my hip pocket.
James Garner had a cameo from Bruce Lee, Elliot Gould had a cameo from Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Mitchum gets Sylvester Stallone in an early on-screen role. This is by no means a bad film, but coming out after both The Long Goodbye and Chinatown did it no favours. Well, Mitchum would return as Marlowe 3 years later in another adaptation of a book that had a classic film made of it already, The Big Sleep. It didn't have the budget of his version of Farewell My Lovely, so this had to be set in modern times and be shot somewhere cheap, meaning the location is moved from LA to London, and we get B-movie director Michael Winner behind the camera. Immediately the grey skies seem off, and it's never really explained why an elderly American private eye is working in 1970s London, and why he still talks like it's 1940. That said, I still like Mitchum, and I have a surprising amount of time for Michael Winner. His films aren't particularly good, but they're rarely boring. The film also features some stellar UK actors, including John Mills and Oliver Reed, and a couple of lovely British pubs, such as the Blackfriar. Now let's move into the 1980s. A few films have clear Chandler influence, such as the hard-drinking, miserable detective in Blade Runner, or the femme fatales making weak men kill for them in films such as Body Heat. And his tone was somewhat mocked in the aforementioned Naked Gun franchise.
Give me the strongest thing you got. On second thought, how about a Black Russian? Very well, sir.
I guess I'm just...
And there was also a Marlowe TV show, which was notable for being the first HBO drama. 11 episodes were produced based on Chandler's short stories, and starring Marlowe on the small screen was the larger-than-life actor Powers Booth, a man who lived up to his name. But also in the 80s, 30 years after his death, we got another Raymond Chandler novel. Well, sort of. Before he had died, he had written 4 chapters of a novel entitled Poodle Springs, and mystery writer Robert B. Parker was brought in to finish it. It's a perfectly fine book about Marlowe struggling to deal with married life. And it was adapted into a TV movie starring James Caan 40 years after Chandler's death in 1998. But the best Chandler mystery of the 1990s is The Big Lebowski. The Coen brothers' comedy masterpiece was their take on a Chandler-esque mystery. They wanted it to be episodic, they wanted it to have a convoluted plot, characters from all walks of life, and of course, they knew it had to be set in Los Angeles. But instead of a hard-boiled detective, we got a stoner bowler.
You know, this could be a lot more complex. I mean, it's not just, it might not be just such a simple, you know?
What in God's holy name are you blathering about?
And in the 90s, you can also see his influence in a very famous screenwriter's work, Shane Black. He came to prominence with his script for Lethal Weapon. That 80s action buddy cop film is set in an LA with plenty of mysteries to solve, and this LA would feature in many of Black's films. His Chandler influence would be even easier to see in 1991's The Last Boy Scout, another 80s buddy cop movie, with a private eye lead played by Bruce Willis, who seems very similar to Marlowe, but maybe just a little more prone to violence.
The Last Boy Scout.
Danger's my middle name.
Mine's Cornelius. Tell anybody I kill you.
And even his script titles feel like straight Marlowe.
The Long Kiss Goodnight.
But with his directorial debut, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang,
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang,
the voiceover and Los Angeles mystery are even closer to Chandler. And he even plays homage to Chandler by having the film broke up into chapters named after Chandler's books. And his film The Nice Guys also has a definite Chandler feeling. Yet again a noir tale set in Los Angeles. And he even directed one of the highest grossing films of all time, Iron Man 3. where he added a certain Chandler flair and narration to the MCU. And in this century, we can see his influence in some other great directors' work. His noirish LA pops up in David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, and in Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice, which was based on Thomas Pynchon's book, which was partially inspired by The Big Sleep and The Long Goodbye. And his cool, dangerous LA even pops up in Drive, and his world can be seen as a big influence on Frank Miller's Sin City. And Marlowe is not gone either. In the 2020s, he popped up in the second film to be just titled Marlowe, this time with an original screenplay, starring Liam Neeson as the detective. I really like Neeson, but here he simply doesn't have an interesting take on the character. He just comes across as gruff and exhausted. The film involves corruption, drugs, and murder, but its biggest crime is to be forgettable. The only bit I really like is where Jessica Lange explained Marlowe's background, but she's actually explaining Raymond Chandler's.
Well, let's see. You had a bad war, and then in the 20s you drank yourself out of a good job in the oil business.
Did I? Well, that's my take on Chandler and cinema. But what about the author himself? Well, someone stepped up and fulfilled a wish he had before he shuffled off this mortal coil. In 2011, Lauren Lachter, a Chandler scholar, petitioned successfully to get Chandler's wife Sissy's remains to be taken and placed with Chandler's in Mount Hope. 100 people attended the ceremony, including Powers Booth. And the new gravestone features a quote from The Big Sleep: "Dead men are heavier than broken hearts." Criminally, he was never given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but the city never quite got rid of him. You can still find Chandler in the movies, in The Private Eyes, The Crooked Streets, The Beautiful Dames, The Bad Men, and the long shadows cast by Good Intentions. He never got a star on the sidewalk. He got something better. He left his fingerprints all over the city. His influence isn't just in direct adaptations of his novels. It's in the entire DNA of film noir and modern crime storytelling, especially anything with a lonely investigator moving through a corrupt, sunlit, or neon-lit city. So farewell, my lovelies. It's time to say goodbye. A long goodbye. Goodbye.